right, welcome everyone to our March 1st community call. So Katie, who normally leads the calls, is out on vacation this week, so I am covering. I'm Mariah Brakey, by the way, the other Resource Kit manager. And just wanted to remind you that this call will be recorded and is recording now. And we will post the copy of the recording of the call later on today. So, first of all, I want to congratulate Jason Walker for getting in Security Policy DSC, a brand new resource module. And that is listed right here. We have two resources, security template and user rights assignment. So if you haven't checked that out, definitely encourage you to. It is a high quality module, so it is supported under DSC. Currently, the module is on track to be released for next Wednesday, March 8th. Our PSDSC resources, X-Exchange, XPS desired state configuration, X remote desktop session host, X SQL server, and X Windows update. Again, this is a definitive list. It could certainly change, especially if we have more pull requests merged in over this week. PSDSC Resources has a new high quality resource, which is Archive. That has been added in. So definitely check that out. And the last resource that we're going to be adding into PSD resources, at least as far as our plan is right now, is package, which we've decided that based on how it's designed and how exe files and MSI files, which is currently what's supposed to be supported under package, the way that they're kind of managed is different enough that we think they should be in two different resources. So right now we're planning on having an exe package resource and an MSI package resource that will be part of PSDSC resources and also an XPS desired state configuration. So we are going to leave X package in XPS desired state configuration so that if there's any breaking changes or anything, that resource will still be available. But we encourage everyone, once we have released the new ones, to upgrade to those. And that will still be a little while out before we release those. So that's just in the works right now. We also have a new code coverage report. If you haven't seen this, you'll notice on some of the modules, you'll see this new link here that says code cov, and it gives a percentage of how much of the code is covered by the tests currently. So if you click on that, you'll come to this page. And so this is for PSDSC resources. It shows we have a little over 80% of code coverage. It gives you some other information here. And then this is called the sunburst graph, which if you look at the parts that aren't as green, or in other cases even like red or yellow, it'll tell you which resources don't have as much coverage as others. So if you click on this little help button up here, you can read more about how that works. You can also go into any module that has the code cov connected to it. Any pull request that's opened will have a code cov report generated for that PR, which tells you how much the code coverage has increased or decreased based on the changes that are made. And you can also click on here, it'll give you more information on that specific PR and the changes there. So currently we have that hooked up to a few of our modules, not all of them yet, but we're in progress on updating that right now. So definitely check that out. It's a really cool tool, very visual, and has a lot of information and data. And I think that takes us to the new configuration sharing. So Zach, if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, sure. Actually, just before we get started on that, I wanted to ask you a question about the code coverage. Do you have any specific goals in mind that you want to see with that code coverage? Do you want to see like, hey, we really want to hit like 60%, 80% code coverage? Do you have any guidance along those lines yet?
Yeah, so based on our high quality guidelines, all of our high quality resources need to have at least 70% code coverage to be considered a high quality module. Of course, the experimental resources, we're trying to update those as much as possible too. So they should all aim for at least 70%, if not more. But I think the other thing that the code coverage sort of gives you is not just the numbers, but also you can investigate which files are the ones that are having less code coverage. And in some cases, that might be more understandable, or maybe there's certain parts that aren't able to be covered as well. So I think it's just a really cool tool to just be able to visualize that and see just where you might be missing things. So yes,
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
definitive answer is 70% is what we're aiming for, if not more if possible.
Great. Hi, this is Zach. I'm actually the PM that's been working with Mariah and Katie on DSC resource coverage, starting probably about 3 or 4 months ago. So this is my first time with an actual agenda item to talk about. And just a real quick note, I am getting on a bus, so if I'm a little quiet or there's a little background noise, I really apologize. But I'm just heading into work. It's only 9 a.m. here.
And Zachary, I'm on. This is Michael Green. I'm on. So if you need backup, if you get disconnected, just let me know.
Yeah, sure. So, and I actually don't have Wi-Fi right now, so I can't see. Michael, are you able to present the repo?
Yep. You just want to see the DSC configurations README from your pull request, correct?
Yeah, please. So, basically, the deal is we want to encourage people to share not just resources, but also configurations that go towards addressing people's actual like end-to-end deployment needs. And so we wanted to A, stress that this is possible, and B, start providing some best practices for creating those configurations and providing guidance around how to actually share them, put them up on the gallery, and provide some guidance on how to do that. So we have a private repo right now, and eventually we'll be making this public. I just kind of want to walk through some of our proposals and get any feedback people had around kind of our initial stage of thinking. So we have a couple of different ways of handling configurations and sharing configurations. Our first proposal is basically sharing a configuration script, and this is how we want to be able to so basically you'd be able to download a script from the gallery, and that script should be attached to a module, and that module should have documentation, examples, and tests, but the script itself is the thing that you can actually run. And the reason we're thinking about it that way is, when you have a configuration, you want to just be able to have something that you run to enact that configuration. So our guidance here is that if you're going to do this, you must have a module that shows that has all this documentation and stuff. So that's the way that people know how to use it. They can look up tests. They can get all that stuff, and that should be linked to so the configuration should have the metadata associated with it in the gallery that lets you actually download it as a dependency. So we're saying that it's a requirement to link that script to a module with all that additional collateral. And then the next part is you should have the actual function of the configuration get called to generate the mod file. So when you actually run the script, it does something. besides just import the configuration function. And that's not a requirement, but it is recommended. And then the next part is you may, you don't have to, but you may want to consider having the actual configuration execute and run start DSC configuration. This is something where we're saying, well, you might want to consider it, you might not. It depends on the scenario. It depends on whether you want to actually have... can you scroll down a little bit, Michael?
I think, hold on, let me stop sharing and try again because I think it's...
Okay. All right, thanks, Link. So you may want to actually execute start DSC configuration when you run the script so that the script becomes a deployment. But again, it depends on situation. So that's an option we're providing. We're not saying you have to do this. And then the one other thing is if you have a PSD1, like an environmental data file, you need to document how to use it, what you expect, what kind of variables you're going to be acting on. And that's a requirement if you have a PSD1 file. The other way to share a configuration is by sharing by having a composite resource. So basically, you can just publish your module, your configuration as a module. It can contain all the other things in there, and you should consider publishing a script that actually uses the composite resource, just because of the way composite resources work. I actually don't think we have documentation around composite resources at this time. Our doc team is working on that currently, and hopefully I'll have something by the end of the week to show that. So those are the two options. You can publish a configuration as a script with an associated module that has all the documentation, or you can publish it as a module. The problem is that's a little bit harder to use out of the box, or out of the gallery, really. And so we recommend that you publish a script to go along with it. The big thing about this is sharing relies on the PowerShell gallery, and the PowerShell gallery relies on some really important metadata. So we have some commandlets for the gallery, and that generates the placeholders that you need. And the requirements of the gallery is that you need to have these 5 things actually filled in. And you should consider also having a requirement on the DSC resources you use in your configuration. So, for example, if you're publishing a configuration for a SQL Server, you should really consider requiring the SQL Server modules so that when the user downloads your configuration script or module, those things automatically flow down onto the machine as well, and you know that user has basically a one-stop shop for getting that configuration up and running. That's a best practice. We're not going to say you must do this. There are situations certainly where it might not be the right thing, but that's something we want you to really strongly consider. For the Hawthorne Guidelines, this should be pretty familiar to everyone. Scroll down a bit more, Michael. These are basically the same. We're basically saying, hey, we have some guidelines around high quality resources. Those are things that you want to consider. You want to consider having tests. You want to consider having documentation. You want to consider having examples. We have the style guidelines. Basically, we're pointing people to the existing documentation that Katie and Mariah have already created because that documentation is great. We're just going to start expanding that into other things besides strict DSC resources. And then the discussion around this is going to be on this community call. So if you could go to the structure of the repo real quick, Michael. So again, the problem we're trying to solve here is having like an end-to-end configuration. That's what users are looking for, and we want to encourage people to share their end-to-end configurations for their environments. And so this is going to be a little different from this repo. When we make it public, it's going to be a little different. We're proposing a different structure. Basically, we're saying, hey, we're going to give you some templates to get started, and really we expect you to clone these templates and publish those configurations into your own repo and publish those configurations into the gallery. We're trying to step away from, with this specific thing, hey, everyone put all your configurations in one place. configurations are going to be really specific to you and your environment. And while that can be helpful to other people, it's not something that we want to all collect and coalesce into a single repository on GitHub. We want people to use, their own repos and feel free to make their own changes without us having to maintain something that's going to be changing a lot. So that's generally our thought process for configurations. And if you have any feedback, please feel free to let me know.
Great, thanks, Zach. So are there any other questions from the community about any of the things we talked about here, or really anything else? Feel free to ask now if you want, or I will also post up an issue on GitHub that you can make any questions or comments as well. So, any questions from the community?
Looks like we have someone typing. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we have Matthew Haynes here, who's asking, as updates are made, are they actually getting tested?
Yeah, just a question. Excuse me, I'm sorry about that.
No
I'm
problem.
just wondering, there's been a lot of change, with DNC overall, there's been a lot of things published and they're getting pester tested and everything, but are they going through actual build pipelines to see if they actually build and work?
So with most of our major changes that happen through the resource kit, we do go in and make sure that there is added test coverage for that, which goes through pester. So I guess it is not like a super involved check to make sure that everything's working, but as long as pester is passing and we see that there are tests for those changes, then we normally do accept it. So are you looking for something more than that, or?
Well, I was just I noticed on a couple of the more recent, I think they were the XSQL server. I pulled maybe a newer version or something, and like something didn't build. There was a weird variable that it was not getting set, or it was. It probably passed all the stub testing, but then I was like, well, has it actually been built on a VM or in a container or something, just to verify it does move all the way through.
So, Mariah, would you mind if I ask a question in this area?
Yeah, go ahead.
This is Michael Green. So this is specifically about configuration sharing, although we could relate it to resource sharing as well. So I've done a lot of prototyping around the idea of, just like we have a DSC Resources.tests community repo where the community can contribute a standardized set of, or I guess you can almost look at it more like a baseline of tests that says these are the things we're looking for as an identification of trust for these assets. And for DSC resources today, those are mostly linting and unit tests is what I would think of, where it's interrogating the code. But in some cases, there are examples where it's because a lot of these are using AppBear and they're ephemeral build nodes where that's just throwing it away at the end. In some cases, it will actually apply those changes to the build node, see if they work, and then the build node gets disposed of. In other cases where it's things like it's requiring bits from off box, or things like standing up a domain controller where there's a lot of changes going on and you could probably lose the local build node, you tend to see a different style of testing where it's just mocking changes to make sure things are called and exit successfully, things like that. So I've actually been prototyping out for configurations, a DSC configurations.tests repo, where that set of tests, I can show you the output. It would, this is a good example. So it would actually go through and do the same type of linting and unit tests that we see for resources today, but then it would actually go in and take those configurations and their dependent resources and put those in Azure Automation, and then bootstrap VMs on Azure and verify that the configurations get loaded that they show compliance in Azure Automation. And then, of course, the next level would be acceptance tests, where you actually WinRM over into the machine and do some testing to make sure that the DSC configuration script did what it promised to do. And that would give you a very conclusive set of test results. My question for the community is, if we publish a set of tests like this and they are expecting to get access to an Azure subscription to actually stand up those VMs and do those type of tests, do most people have either an MSDN account or maybe an organization subscription or some access to Azure where that type of testing can go on? Or do you feel like that makes it non-accessible?
Well, I think that'd be a great idea. I mean, at least from my side, I do have an MSDN, and I can stand up whatever. That's where I do a vast majority of testing. It does change, like when you bring things inside the firewall, essentially for an enterprise, things get dicey, So it may have passed in Azure, but then when I finally get it behind all my stuff, like, oh, that one, it doesn't work, but the older version used to work,
Sure.
Stuff like that. Yeah.
That's something I'd be interested in learning more, hearing more detail about, because I'm thinking about what are the ways that we could manipulate things like the network security group rules, so that it's completely disconnected and acts more like an offline environment, even though it's running in a cloud environment. So maybe we could follow up offline. I'll throw my information in the IM window.
My biggest thing is, like, I need to be able to pass credentials on everything, because we have at least where I work, we have different pipelines, and one team builds this, so they need creds on X, on this thing. So creds have to move from one to another, and just making sure creds are always part of every build, and we're not ripping them out of a resource or anything.
Okay.
Makes sense? Kind of, I hope.
I follow you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and actually, that actually reminds me, one of the things we need to do with configurations is just make sure we have guidelines around credentials and configurations, and just guidelines around making sure people aren't publishing their credentials to GitHub. So.
Yeah, that's a good one.
So Glenn has a question about timeline for the repo to go public. There's not much stopping us. We were basically just making sure that someone in the community had a look at it before we flip the switch. We might have some additional work to do and some additional feedback, but Michael, Keith, do you have any? I think we're looking at pretty short term, right?
My goal in this was just to run it by folks who have been doing the publishing for a while and make sure that they see it. It's been put together in a way to be as non-controversial as possible. It does leverage the ability to require other modules from either scripts or modules that are hosted in the gallery. And we want to make sure that people think about that and give us some feedback if they're concerned about it. And that was really all.
Yeah, so I had no problem flipping on the switch on this sooner rather than later.
I agree. I would wait until after the meeting this afternoon. That's it.
Great. One more comment I wanted to make on the tests too is that I know we emphasize a lot of the code coverage and unit tests for the high quality modules, but the integration tests are also very much emphasized, and we make sure that we do have those end-to-end tests for at least all of the basic functionality of the high quality modules. So with some of the experimental modules, again, the unit tests are usually like more encouraged now to make sure those are there, but the integration tests are not always, we're not quite as strict on those with the experimental modules. So yeah, just be aware of that. If you're finding an issue, like a build issue with the high quality modules, like definitely submit an issue or an issue on GitHub for that. But and do for the experimental modules as well. But just know that yeah, the testing there is not quite as in depth as it really should be. But we're working on building that up. So
Yeah, I can take for X-SQL Server. We are trying to get all the unit testing first, and the integration tests. My plan is making the integration test as soon as the unit tests are finished. But the integration test is probably going to need. We cannot run the integration test in the AppWare, so most likely the integration test needs to be run by the user.
Is that because of just because it needs a SQL Server machine, or was there other?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It does have AppWire does have a SQL Server installed, but it's the Express editions. So
okay.
So far we could actually install SQL Server on AppWire, but we have to download the media somewhere.
Right.
And the media is kind of large, so it's going to take a while to download it.
Right.
So, but if it's possible to download it and run the X-SQL service and app resource on it, absolutely we can do that.
Great.
But unless it's
for longer installations where you anticipate that the test is going to run for more than an hour, is there an alternative build service that you've identified, or something like VSTS, something you've looked at for community work as well?
Is this a question for me or for Johan?
Oh, no, this is Michael asking really the community at large.
Okay.
Are you anticipating tests that will run for more than an hour, at which point AppWare will start?
Yeah, X-SQL Server will probably run that. If you're going to test failover, always on, and SQL Server testing with different SQL Server editions, it's going to most likely run for an hour.
Yeah.
I actually sent an email to AppWire to ask them, and they had something in the works to use Azure images in some way. So maybe that is something we can use later.
Yeah, that's how I'm doing my configuration script testing, but I still have to have my tests that are interrogating the Azure VMs finish within an hour for the build node. Otherwise the build node stops listening to me, and I never get my test results back. So unless I put everything, and I guess I suppose I could like trust that the VMs in Azure completes that the tests finish successfully and never halt, and then like the last line would go write my test results. But currently at the end of my test automation, I have it deleting the entire resource group, and that way my tests or the cost of my tests are really, really minimal. And in order for that to work, I need it to finish within that 1 hour window. So this is another area I'm very interested in. And we could consider something like BSTS as well. So.
Yeah.
Or if there are other services we should look at and I should consider prototyping, I'm all ears.
Yeah. Is it possible to run, I haven't looked at that, but is it possible to run parallel testing on different nodes?
Yes, in fact, that's what, It is, but I don't
know if AppWare supports that yet.
It might be like some sort of an experience. They've got a help page on it, but I have not looked at it in detail.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, integration tests are definitely something that are tricky with a lot of the resources for sure. I would say as of now, definitely including them, even if we can't run them on AppWare, is still encouraged, because then at least we can run them separately on other machines to make sure that everything's passing when there's changes and stuff, which is what we had to do for DSC resources for a while before AppWare got updated to the correct build. So having them is certainly still helpful, even if we can't run them on AppWare.
I just wanted to show, here's an example where I've got AppWare spinning up, testing 2 different configurations, with I think 6 OS versions per in parallel. I'm not sure if that's what you had in mind or not, but
if you're showing something, I can't see it, but
yeah, I've got my email address in the IM window. If you'd like to send, if you wouldn't mind sending me an email, we could take this into a longer discussion. I'd really like to get your feedback.
Yeah, sure.
Great. Any other questions or comments?
Hi there. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm driving, so I'm a bit disconnected. Not necessarily on this specific topic, but generally on DSC. I'm just wondering what the view is at the minute around class-based DSC resources, and whether there's ambition to change some of the standard Microsoft wants into class-based, or whether we should be putting effort into or not into making our custom ones using class-based.
Yes, this is a discussion that we've been talking about too. We definitely encourage you to, if you're making new resource modules, if you want to make it class-based, go ahead and do that. We don't have a example module yet to show, which I know makes it a little bit tricky. We still have some difficulties with unit tests in particular for the class-based resources that we're still working on, kind of workarounds for that or best practices. So yes, we will certainly accept class-based resources as long as it still conforms to all the testing and style guidelines. But script resources are totally fine to submit as well. So I would say we don't have an official guideline for that as of now.
We do have, the documentation, but yeah, we don't have hey, here's a perfect class-based resource. We're not planning on moving a lot of the work we're doing to class-based resources, just because we do have to keep backwards compatibility in mind. So.
Right. Yeah, because I was thinking, while there's very little examples out there, we've been scouring documentation, basically flying quite by the dark. I mean, we've made really good progress because we've got a full-blown solution out of it. But just wondering whether we were going to see more from Microsoft around the class-based side. But awesome, as long as we are on the right track of doing work with class-based. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Let's see. So I think that's all that I have here. I know we're a little bit over time here, but I do want to make sure everyone got a chance to have any questions or comments. If you do have anything else you would like to say, you are welcome to post it on our issues page for the community call, which I will post shortly. So thank you everybody for joining, and we will talk to you in the next 6 weeks for the community call.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
See you. Bye.
Brilliant.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.